This is Late Tee Time, the golf betting podcast that finds the best betting value closer to the first shot being struck than anyone else.
Always gamble responsibly. Visit begambleaware.org for more information.
And hello, everybody. Welcome along, Late Tee Time podders out there. We're back, as always, on a Wednesday to take you through the golf ahead. And the eagle-eyed amongst you that follow us on the Late Tee Time pod Twitter feed will have seen that I am James, as always. Although I wasn't last week because Dave Tindall did it just on the audio because I was doing tennis. But we have I was going to say imposter. That's not right, is it? We basically replaced Dave Tindall, who was holidaying, with this gentleman, who I'll bring him on now, Matt Cooper. How are you? Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, James. Thank you very much. I kind of made a half appearance with a little bit of a message from the Women's British Open a couple of weeks ago, but it's great to make my complete debut this week.
Well, as I said on the Twitter earlier, if you nail all of your shouts this week, then Dave Tindall might struggle to get the shirt back.
Quite possibly, yeah.
If you snooze, you lose. You know, you clear off to Paris and leave the shirt empty, then Matt Cooper jumps into it. We're talking about the BMW Championship first and foremost. We'll move on to the Czech Masters a little bit later on. I'm going to basically pick your brains about the Live Tour as well halfway through to see if you are of the same kind of opinion as Dave Tindall in terms of that competition. But let's start off in the US, shall we? The BMW Championship on the PGA Tour, the top end of the market. I'll just give you the first four here. Rory McIlroy, he's around about 11-1 to win the thing. John Rahm is 14-1. Matt Fitzpatrick 16-1. Scotty Scheffler is in there at 16-1. I mean, you can see there, Matt, just from those names, that it's a good field in the US this week. How are you approaching this one when it comes to betting?
Well, initially, it's a bit of a tricky one. This is the first time the PGA Tour's ever been to the state of Delaware, which is a little bit deceptive. Delaware's a tiny little state tucked in between New Jersey and Maryland, and they've been very close, but never quite been there, which means, of course, they've never been to this golf course. One man has played it in competition. That's Justin Thomas. He played in something called the Palmer Cup, which is a kind of like a Ryder Cup for college golf. And he actually played very well in that, got 3.5 points from his 4 matches, but we didn't know very much about it apart from the fact that Robert Trent Jones had designed the golf course, and we know a little bit about him. Valderrama, which you'll know a lot about, it's a regular host on the European Tour. Firestone Country Club, that's another of his that used to host an event regularly on the PGA Tour. So there were a few clues there, but we've really had to wait and see what the players have said, and the more of them that have been in, the more it's kind of revealed that something we kind of expected, which is going to favour good drivers of the golf ball. So Rory McIlroy has literally just been talking to the press just before we came on air, and he said it's up my alley, scope to hit driver, length is an advantage here, just my sort of golf course that I can feel I can excel on. The flip side of that is, Rory McIlroy just doesn't win as often as he should do. So it's as much as we would like to see him win more, he finds a way down the final straight to allow somebody to pass him. So although I recognise this is a good week for him, I'm a little bit dubious about his chances again.
So when I take it from what you just said there, then we're not taking Rory, who is the favourite at 11-1 to win. Are we going to go a bit further down the list?
Just going to drop a little bit further down. I would be very interested in John Rahm. He really likes playing golf on this type of golf course, and he's even said this kind of area, the northeast of America. He said, that the golf courses around here they kind of suit him. So he's in much the same sort of ballpark in that sense as Rory McIlroy. But the big thing with John Rahm this year is that, with the exception of the Mexico Open, which wasn't a great field, that is the 1 week this year when he's putted and chipped anything like his normal quality. So although, like Rory, he's a great player from the tee, he hits it a long way, he makes a lot of gains on the field from the tee, he's another player who's just has struggled to get over the line. the thing that almost tempted me with him is that he finished top 5 last week, which is a bit of a leap from what he's been doing recently. But actually, I'm going to go back to what I first said. Justin Thomas, he's got a little bit of course experience. He's actually admitted that he doesn't really remember it from 9 years ago. He just remembers it was a bit wet, and it's going to be very different to that this week. But clearly, something about the course fitted his eye. But the other thing that I really like with him, there's a couple of them. One, he's won at Firestone, which I mentioned earlier is a Robert Trent Jones Senior golf course. And that is also a golf course that people who can drive the ball well there, they succeed. And Thomas himself, he said, if I drive it well here, it will definitely favour me. And added to that theory is he's got the Titleist TSR3 driver in his bag as of last week. And in recent weeks, Cam Smith added it to his bag, won the Open. Will Zalatoris added it to his bag, and he won last week. So Thomas is going for the TSR3 hat trick. So that's the confirmer for me. And you can get him 16-1 top 7, which is the top price and the top number of places.
So that's for William Hill, isn't it? For Justin Thomas to win the BMW Championship. So basically, what you're saying is golf's easy. You just add that club to your bag and you start winning.
Yeah. So if I teed it up this week with the TSR3, 100-1 outside. No, it's not that simple. No, if only.
So that's the BMW Championship. Justin Thomas 16-1. William Hill 7 places for him to lift that trophy. Before we move across the Atlantic to the Czech Masters, let's have a little bit of a chat about LIV, because I've seen on Twitter the Tiger Woods looking very stony faced, walking to his big 4x4 off a plane, a private jet, to go and have a chat with the PGA players. They're trying to kind of galvanize, aren't they? They're trying to get the PGA Tour to be strong and to try and resist the lure of LIV. How do you see the LIV? Because I've had many conversations with DT on this podcast. Dave is very moralistic. I wouldn't take that dirty money even if you offered me $10 million for 2 weeks' work, kind of stuff. Are you of the same kind of ilk, or?
I kind of take a bit of a two-tone look to this. I'm with Dave in saying that I wouldn't want the sport being in hock to Saudi Arabia and the PIF, the private investment fund that is funding this. And I went to the first LIV event in Centurion. I also went to the press conference that was quite controversial. In fact, I asked one of the questions that was quite controversial, and I got a little bit heated about the lack of morals. But I think the media and the two major tours are making a bit of a public relations mistake in focusing on the human rights and the greed of the players as the two battlegrounds, because I think what's happening with that is it's taking all the attention towards that, and I don't think they're battlegrounds that can be won. Whereas I think the real issue and the real threat here, once you acknowledge what that threat is, it actually makes a lot of these questions far more straightforward to sort of to answer the critics. So, for instance, the threat here I perceive. And I'm, there are people who disagree with me on this. When I was at the Open, I chatted to lots of journalists who've had inside information, and they disagree. But I think this is akin to a hostile takeover by LIV of the top level of professional golf. The notion that LIV can live alongside the PGA Tour at the same time, it doesn't really wash when you start to imagine those two schedules together. So let's imagine that they try to do that. LIV has 14 events next year. Now, if they're going to live together, a lot of the players who are currently aligned with the PGA Tour might go over to LIV. In all those 14 weeks, the PGA Tour events next to them are going to be downgraded because they're going to have poor fields. Because those players are going to be playing all those events, probably at least 14 to 16 other events are going to have weakened fields. So that's as many as 30 PGA Tour events are suddenly weakened. That means that the corporate backers they've got are going to be wondering what we're putting so much money into this tournament for. So the PGA Tour is going to be weakened. Two things happen: either PGA weakens and it struggles forever, or LIV steps into the breach and takes over. And the people who are in charge of LIV, the PIF, they're not really interested in being sort of half involved in something. They want to get complete involvement in it. So that's one threat that the PGA Tour has to be taken into account. A second element of that is, as it currently stands, the two major tours are tour member tours, so they can vote off the board. They can decide that you are not doing a good job. We want to get rid of you. They can't do that, and the golf cannot do that with Live. As we're suddenly discovering, when all this is going to court, we're suddenly discovering that all these notions that they're free operators just doesn't exist. Those players have got to stick with Live for the whole schedule. And I wouldn't trust them that 14 is the limit that they're going to do. But I mean, that's me being a bit of a skeptic. There's another element to this, and this is that the PIF answers to SBS. Now, Greg Norman says he doesn't answer to SBS, but PIF does. Now, the man that currently runs PIF likes golf. But what happens if, as has happened in the past, SBS says, I don't want the bloke who's running PIF at the moment, I want somebody else. Now, that would be a bit awkward if it happened now. It would be potentially ruinous for the top of professional golf if that happened in 3 years' time, when they've thrown their lot into the sport. Now, once you start to see that landscape and the potential for basically capsizing the sport, that's why the PGA Tour is scared. That's why a lot of the players ought to be scared. And also, that's why, and there's a difference. Once you recognize that, when Keith Pelley gets criticism for going to Saudi Arabia for the Saudi International, he was content because it was for 1 week. He's scared that if they take control of the entire circuit, that's very different to going for 1 week. Now, there's no doubt there's a lot of hypocrisy involved in that, but actually you can see there's hypocrisy, but there's reasons why if you just, let's say Pelley's just a straightforward hypocrite, well, in one sense he's not, because he's quite happy to take their money for 1 week, but he doesn't want them controlling the entire sport and the entire circuit. So it's a complicated, long-winded answer, but I'm mostly against it because I think there's huge threats to the long-term security of the sport at the top.
So if I was on the phone to you now, is that Mr. Cooper?
Yeah.
I'm sitting in Saudi Arabia. I've heard that you cover golf. Now, we want people out here to work for us and to promote our tournament and to write about it. $10 million, do you? We only need you for 3 months. Are you coming?
Yeah, a good question, but I'd say no. And I tell you, here's another reason why I could do it. I reckon that there's loads of jobs I could take where I could earn more money than I do doing the job I'm currently doing. I'm doing what I do because I like doing it, and if I wanted to earn more money, I could pretty much go and work in a shop. To be honest, it's like so like if it's just a matter of money, there's loads of things I could do. But I mean, I also appreciate there's lots of people who do a different thing. The only other thing I would say is when lots of people say they're doing this for their family, and I appreciate that you want to do great stuff for your family, there also becomes a point, I would suspect, where you've got so much money, it actually becomes a threat for your children, because what you're actually going to just do is you're just going to bring up a bunch of entitled little brats. Yeah. Now, I wouldn't turn to Ian Poulter and say quite those terms, but I mean, in many ways, he's an exceptional character, Ian Poulter, and an exceptional sort of role model in the way that he's worked so hard to get what he's achieved. But it is interesting that there is a threat that nobody ever talks about. When you've got so much money, the security that you're creating for your children is actually just to get a little bit lost because they've got no drive. And I can see the potential for there being a Netflix documentary in the future, The Children of Liv, just to see what's actually happened to them.
There's a female tennis player who I cover quite a lot, Jessica Pegula, who's an American whose father is a oil and gas tycoon in America. He owns the Buffalo Bills and the Buffalo Sabres, and he's got loads and loads of money. I really admire her. She's number 7, I think, in the world at the moment, because she's basically thought, I want to do something for myself. And she is earning a lot of money playing tennis. And she could have just sat around the pool, gone to all the socialite events and not really bothered, because she could have afforded to quite a swanky dress and gone off to do the cocktail parties. But I quite admire people like that. But they're few and far between, I would suggest.
Well, I suspect it. I mean, it's a classic example where it would be very straightforward to say, well, it is possible for those children to do well, and I'm sure plenty of them will do. But what we're really looking at is the majority. In my head, when I think of this program, The Children of Liv, it resembles 7 Up. You know, the fantastic ITV documentary that like visited the children every 7 years. Yeah, that's kind of my live up. Yeah, that'd be my job.
Live up. You could tell that the person from Saudi Arabia calling you is actually not real, because you'd have a better phone than that, which is a pen. Anyway, let's move on. The Czech Masters is where we're looking at next, and I'll just have to change my screen so I can get the prices for the Czech Masters up in front of me. So I'll waffle on until I do that. And we have the winner markets for this one. Thomas Pieters is the favourite. He's 8-1. Then there's quite a big gap, actually. He's hot favourite, isn't he? I've actually not looked at these yet. Thomas Pieters 8-1. And then you have to jump all the way to 22-1 for the next in the rankings. Victor Perez, Richard Mansell, and then Henny Duplessis is 28. Is it that cut and dry, this, that Thomas Pieters is just going to walk it? Because the prices would suggest so.
Well, it's interesting. He's been talking today, and last week, Rory McIlroy admitted he was quite rusty because he played no golf for 2 weeks. That is a bit of a klaxon warning for anybody who wants to back Thomas Pieters to win, because he's just admitted that he's just spent 2 weeks on the beach and hasn't touched the golf clubs until last weekend. So if Pieters is not, I mean, he's a good golfer, but he's not as good as Rory McIlroy. So he's fighting that particular problem. It's quite interesting. I know you guys have been on the Eddie Pepperell train in the last couple of weeks with some success.
Did you see? I'll cut in there. Did you see his video on Twitter?
I did, yes. If nothing else, a spectacular. His acting's come on bounds because he wasn't the worst in a few of those little bits and bobs that the European Tour put up, but it's quite a spectacularly dry performance, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, if you haven't seen it, have a look at the At Late Tea Time pod, because I've on Twitter, because I retweeted it this morning. Because he's basically a bit of a dig at live with a twist at the end, isn't it?
It is, yes. But yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because, as Dave has pointed out quite regularly, he's not just finishing high up the leaderboard. He was second at the Hero Open, but one of 3 top 20s in his last 3 starts. But he's also finished 5th, and 9th in 6 starts in this tournament. So given that his stats were again very good when he was 20th last time out, he's obviously of interest. However, I mean, the bet I really like this week is actually in at Betfair. You can add who you want in a multiple of top 20s, and although I admire Pieters and his chances this week, because he's again a bit like Eddie Pepperell, he's made 6 starts here, 4 of them top 10 and 2 of them victories, hence his favoritism. But in addition to that, Thomas Pieters, in his last 10 starts in regular DP World Tour events, he has 8 top 20s in his last 10 starts. So Thomas Pieters at the moment is just gobbling up this quality of field. Pepperell, we've already mentioned, has got 3 top 20s in the last 3 starts, 3 top 20s in his 6 starts here. And then I also like Tristan Lawrence, the South African. He won at the start of this season. And again, in this level of field this season, he's got 7 top 20s in 9 starts. The big thing with Tristan Lawrence, he's absolutely exceptional on par 5 this season, and he's done it before. 2 seasons ago, he was top of the top par 5 scoring averages. And the par 5s are the really important holes on this golf course, Albatross Golf Resort, just outside of Prague. So this course looks right up Tristan Lawrence's alley. And if you combine the 3 of them, Pieters is 4-9, Pepperell evens, I think. Tristan Lawrence just a touch over evens. Put together, they're 6.5 or 11-2 for all 3 of them to make the top 20 at the Betfair Sportsbook.
I like that. So it's Tristan Lawrence, Thomas Pieters, and Eddie Pepperell, all to make the top 20, 6.5-1. And that's with Betfair, you said?
That's correct, yeah.
And if you fancy going with Eddie Pepperell and continuing to support him, his best price of about 30-1, but you can probably get him 25-1, 5 places or 7 places with Betfair, around that kind of area anyway. That's where Eddie Pepperell is situated. So the 2 bets then on his debut, Matt Cooper's debut on the Late Tea Time podcast. The BMW Championship, we've got Justin Thomas 16-1, William Hill for 7 places. And for the Czech Masters, this is with Betfair. It's 3 players to get into the top 20. Lawrence, Peters and Pepperell. 6.5 to 1 for them all to be in the top 20. Matt Cooper, it's been very good to have you with me. I'm not sure if I'm going to allow Dave Tindall back. What are you doing next Wednesday?
I think I'm free. So if Dave gets lost, Dave might get lost, because how familiar are you with the film Midnight in Paris?
Oh yes,
yeah, a big fan. So last time I was in Paris, I actually made a midnight sojourn to the steps where what's the actor called? Like, he's gone and slipped it. It's not Woody Harrelson. What Matthew? Oh gosh, Owen. What's he called? Shaggy hair.
Owen Wilson.
Owen Wilson. So Owen Wilson goes to those steps into a car and finds himself in the 1920s. And I went there. No car turned up, but I have told Dave exactly where those steps are. So if Dave doesn't turn up after this week, it's because he's in the 1920s, living it up with F. Scott Fitzgerald or something.
I can guarantee that he'll be running a golf betting podcast in the 1920s. He'll be getting it all right.
I tell you what, if he does go back to the 1920s, it would remind me of, there's a very good line in an Alexi Sale podcast where he talks about writing a letter to his teenage self. And, it's very sort of pompous. It's a nice thing, but a very pompous thing that people talk about, what they do, what they tell each other. And Alexi Sale did this, he followed the brief and told his younger self a few things, and then just said I can't remember what year it was, but he said something like, in 1968, so-and-so wins the Grand National. I thought, yes, that's exactly what I'd do in any letter to my younger self.
You'd have to, wouldn't you? You'd have to, bearing in mind what this podcast and what we're doing is all leading to. So, but if only we'd gone forward a few weeks and jumped back, because we'd guarantee that the tips this week would be right. But gamble responsibly, everybody, because we can't guarantee that. We don't have time travel just yet on the Late Tea Time podcast. But Matt Cooper's tips are there for you. If Dave doesn't get lost, he will be back with me this time next week on the Late Tea Time pod. But Matt, it's been great to meet you, and thank you very much for jumping in.
That's great. Thanks a lot, James. See you soon.
And thanks out there, everybody, for watching / listening. You can see on this graphic that you can follow us, whatever you're watching us on now. There are 2 other options. You can follow us on YouTube, Twitter, or the Facebook as well. And so we'll do the live videos come out when we're doing it live, obviously. And then you'll see the you'll hear the podcast coming out on audio a little bit later on in the day as well. But thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again very soon indeed.
Always gamble responsibly. Visit begambleaware.org for more information.